You were an agent for how long? What was the
Going on 20 years.
You were a CIA agent for 20 years, covert operations officer, right? So you were this was your job. This was not like persons using somebody in media to say, hey, we want you to kind of help us out with some information.
Right.
No, this is what you did for a living, okay? And when you were in, what year to what year were you in? What were the years you served?
I got out around 2000 or so.
So 1980 to 2000, give or take?
Yeah.
Okay. So during those years, Facebook comes out in 04. Okay, I think MySpace is 03, 02. I don't know the exact year, but it's around the same time. Can you check to see when MySpace came out? So social media wasn't really fully around from 1980 to 2000. So during that time, when you guys are working on ops and you're worried about China or Russia or what they're doing, what were some of those threats then that they use to inject their propaganda and their beliefs? We've all seen what that Russian operative, what's his name, Boris, when he says, well, disinformation, and they use this and they use that. What were some of the fears and concerns you had when you saw how they attacked us?
Yeah, look, I mean, this has been going on forever. It's a great point that you're raising. The technology has made it easier, right, to influence people, to get your ideas out there. So if you think about, you go all the way back to World War II, right? Before Hitler invaded Russia, then they were allies, right? So what was Russia busy doing? They were busy trying to influence, and Germany to some degree as well, trying to influence U.S. public opinion. At the time, it was very sort of isolationist at the point. So the Russian agents were here. They were influencing trade unions. They were buying journalists, right, to print articles. They were setting up fake associations, right, that would push isolationism. So it was a more laborious process in a way. Those things are still done, right? But the technology has just sped the ability to do that, to influence. So if you're trying to influence the population of a small country to overthrow it, to get rid of some despotic dictator, for instance, in the old days, it was a long-term covert action campaign, right? And now you've just got so many options, right? And people have, I think something else that's happened is, again, this idea that because every generation wants it to be easier for their own kids, right? Eventually you get to diminishing returns. And by that I mean, naturally, my father wanted it to be easier for me. His father, wanted it to be easier for him. I want it to be easier for my kids. Well, eventually you get to this point where it becomes so soft, right? You can have the shit that goes on around us, right? Because we're not worried about going out and finding clean water and collecting food and it's I don't know, maybe that theory is completely off, but that's where I'm going.
So they would buy, let's just say, journalists that's working at New York Times, or they would buy journalists that working at a major paper. Wow. That was one of their ways, and then, hey, write this or influence this, and that was their way to getting to the people.
Yeah, typically it would be a sort of a broader campaign. You wouldn't say just one, right? I mean, and you operate on a lot of different levels. Like, this is nothing new. I'm not, talking sources and methods. This is,
Mike, how would they make sure that they wouldn't whistleblow or say anything? Why? How would they make sure the journalists wouldn't come out and say, I just got approached by this, and they're paying me this much money. I just want to come out and tell, here's what I've been doing.
It's the same way you would go out and say, I'm gonna recruit some asset, right? You have to ensure that you understand what their motivations are, right? It's the same thing, right? So, that's why you wouldn't go after somebody, who would be a leading journalist of their day, right? Because they've in today's world, right? You've got somebody who's got 10 million followers, and so you're not going to necessarily do that. You're going to do it in a more subtle way, which is what the technology allows you to do.
Great,
right?
I got
it allows you to put it in there in various ways. And people watch something on TikTok, and their first thought is not, this is probably disinformation, or I wonder if somebody's paying for this campaign.
Yeah.
Right?
Would it be easier to be a CIA agent today or during your time? Meaning, the tools. The tools are the tools. They're always going to, the tools are going to evolve, and they're going to change, and they're going to be here, and they're going to move on. Is it harder to be an agent today to catch, or is it easier to find their fingerprints in different places and kind of work it backwards?
Yeah, it's easier today in certain ways, right? You're not walking around in the middle of some shithole trying to figure out where the hell you are using a map and a compass, and shooting an azimuth. I mean, it's just like so you're just like looking at your phone, going, "Oh, we're right here. We're half a click away from the target." And in the old days, you'd be like, "I don't know where the hell we are." I don't want to make it sound overly simplistic, but there's some truth to that. Or you're stomping around, someplace looking for a phone that actually works, right? Because you're in some place that's difficult, a challenging environment. Now you got to figure out where is there a phone I can actually.
Wow.
This is actually
Payphone.
Payphone. Yeah. Remember those days? And so, but in other ways, it hasn't really changed because in other ways, the key to intelligence, whether you're talking about U.S. intelligence community or you're talking about the Brits or anyone out there or our adversaries, the key is the human source, right? I mean, the technology has improved in terms of your collection of technical information, right? We got satellites up there floating around, right? I mean, China has this, program trying to capture all the data off our satellites. We talk about is space going to become weaponized? It already is.
I was
right?
just going to say that.
And so, but at the core of intelligence is the human, right? And that really hasn't changed that much, right? Identifying who's got access to something, who's possibly motivated to talk to you and why, that's probably never going to change.
What were the profile of people that could be a bot? Like, and what I mean by that is when you want to get somebody that is giving us intel and is becoming a spy for us, and you're getting somebody from Russia that's giving us feedback of what they're doing. What profile would you look at to see this guy could be a good asset for us?
Yeah. I mean, I would argue that in places like China or places like Russia, it can be easier because you've got more opportunity, right? They're living in a you've got more avenues of attack, right? In a place like the U.S. where you still have your traders. Unfortunately, people like James Nicholson and Edley Hansen Hansen and Edley Howard and
Right.
Aldrich Ames and all these guys. So you still have people like that, but it is a little bit easier, I think, to target people who are living under the thumb of a regime because you can point out the obvious, to some degree. But typically, ideology and there's been a lot written about all of this and the techniques for recruitment. So I'm not, again, this is not sources and methods, but typically ideology is not the driver, right? It's something else. It's something more personal. Maybe it's something as base as money. Maybe it's they don't feel like they got enough hugs, right? A lot of times they feel disrespected, right? And
You're saying ideology is not the number one motivator?
Yeah, typically
to
not.
Become an asset?
Yeah, when you think about the biggest cats, I mean, and that's although that's some of the best Russian sources we've had over the years. Again, nothing new. This stuff's been out there. Is they have been based on ideology. But for the most part, it's something else. Their kid is sick and they need access to health care or something, whatever it may be. And it could be very pedestrian as a reason. But you have to look for those things. And again, I guess the point being, going back to the original point, is the technology helps to speed things along sometimes. Mm-hmm. But underlying that, you need somebody. You can collect all the information, remotely and through intercepts that you want, but you need somebody standing in that tent who can then tell you what everybody looked like when they made this decision, right? Or what were they actually thinking?
Yeah, because Mike, I was in the United States Air Force at a nuclear missile base. What was my first assignment? And to get my clearance, I'll never forget. I go home and I'm at the mall in my town, and my 5th grade. Mind you, I'm 19 at this point. My 5th grade math teacher, Mr. Bonaparte, big buff, he was a football player, black guy. He was like, Oshana. I'm like, hey, Mr. Bonaparte, we have a moment. He's like, what the hell are you doing? And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, somebody in the government called me. I'm not even joking. And they asked me if I thought that you, as a child, would grow up to do anything to like sabotage or do something against the country. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah. He's like, good luck with whatever the hell you're doing. He's like, I can't make this up. And I was like, whoa, that's just
part of the vetting process for the Air Force.
That's normal, though.
So yeah, it's normal. But Mike, going to my point, you're talking about technology. Yeah. So like when you have like, it's easier, I'm guessing, for their like digital profile, like a Mark Zuckerberg with Facebook, that must have been the CIA and the government's just like, oh my God, people have been fighting to keep this information. Now you're just giving it because it's cool to do. That helps.
Yeah,
right?
well, I mean, look, I run a company that private sector business that does intelligence and investigations and due diligence, and the amount of information that's available out there on the average citizen, not just here in the U.S., but around the world for the most part, is astonishing compared to 20 years ago, 30 years ago for sure. But it's that uniquely American mindset, which is it's the government I got to worry about. No, it's not. Mm-hmm. It's the private business or the private sector that's been hoovering up all this information that you've been gleefully, happily giving them.
Let me tell you something, Mike. Yeah. A generation ago, you could literally have a family in the next town over, and your family would not know. Okay? Now, if you look at another girl's story on Instagram, your sleuth CIA girlfriend will find you in less than 24 hours. That's the sign of the times.
Sounds like you're speaking from experience.
I'm 100% not speaking from experience. I love you, baby. Yeah. No, but it's so true that technology has sped up everything in our lives for good and for bad.
Yeah.
And Mike, just really fast, not to go up. So a lot of people get confused when it comes to CIA agent, which you were, to assets. And my question is, when it comes to like an asset, is there an expiration date on that person? Like, let's say you use them on a mission. Are they just on standby for future, or is it kind of like,
no,
good luck, goodbye?
Yeah, terminology always trips people up. You're right. It's not so much agent. It's officer.
Got you.
Don't know why.
Got you.
Asset, you're right, is the target, the individual. Agent is typically law enforcement for the most part. And there is a difference. Yeah, there's a difference between law enforcement recruitment of assets or sources and intel community, right? And this is kind of goes across the board. It's not just, I don't think it's, from my experience, it's not just in the U.S., is that you tend to, from an intel perspective, you tend to look at assets for long term, right? Because you never know where they're going to end up, right? Mm-hmm. Law enforcement, for good reason, sometimes it's a project specific or a case specific, recruitment or development of a source, and then boom, you're gone, right? Mm-hmm. Or you need to burn the source because you're moving towards the courts. Mm-hmm. So there is a big difference there, but human nature being what it is, I don't know that motivations have changed that much, right? I think attention spans have shortened, but I don't think motivations have changed that much for people.
So if you like this clip and you want to watch another one, click right here. And if you want to watch the entire podcast, click right here.